Welcome back to Between the Silos, where we talk about sales and marketing alignment and why so many companies struggle with it. Today, I'm joined by Alex Desynoyers. Alex is a senior partner development manager at HubSpot. A seasoned partner strategist, Alex brings real-time insight from HubSpot's work with high-growth companies across industries, offering a unique view into what's driving scalable revenue today. Prior to joining HubSpot in 2018, Alex worked in client services on the agency side as an account manager. This experience informed his human-first philosophy that he applies today in the ever-evolving world of technical implementation and systems integration in the HubSpot ecosystem. Thanks for joining me, Alex.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a lot of fun. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. All right, so jumping into it, I'm really excited to pick your brain about the huge announcement HubSpot recently rolled out in regards to AI. But first, I want to hear from you a little bit about what HubSpot customers have been struggling with that pushed you all toward creating the new HubSpot Deep Research Connection.
Yeah, it's a really exciting time, and I think there's just so much out in front of us, but also so much that's happened that got us here. I think the thing that HubSpot has always hung our hat on is that we're supposed to be easy, fast, and unified, but we can't really take that for granted because when you're a HubSpot user, it may not always feel easy to get the answers you're looking for. And I think this represents a really big opportunity to help people cut through the noise and just be able to get the answer to the fundamental questions they've always wanted to ask, but maybe found it hard to actually get the reporting they need, for example. And I also just think there was just such an opportunity when you look at the numbers, right? We have 250,000 plus businesses using HubSpot as their source of truth. And more than 75% of those folks are already using ChatGPT. So it felt like there was just a huge opportunity there. And I think if you take nothing else away from, my thoughts on this, I think the end goal was to be able to use natural language to get the deep insights you've been craving, right? So the shift towards large language models is the idea that you can just ask them a real human-like question, just use your words to ask the questions, and then the deep research gets you really meaningful data-backed insights. And so we're kind of just bridging those two things here, the natural language capacity of ChatGPT, and then all that data is already inside of HubSpot, but what do we actually do with it? And I think we're kind of meeting in the middle there.
Give me the Cliff Notes version. What does that really mean? What can I do? What is it? I think a lot of people will be like, cool, okay, HubSpot is my platform. ChatGPT is, doing a lot of research for me. But at its simplest, talk to me like a kindergartner. What is the Deep Research Connector?
Yeah, I mean, I think a really good way to think of it is it's the proliferation of these AI tools, the sort of customer approach that a lot of these companies have been taking is I want to be able to just use my normal language and talk to it like I would talk to any other person. But yeah, get the benefit of the data that's powering these large language models. Is essentially what we're doing here is just saying, what if HubSpot's data, the data inside your own portal, was the source material for the large language model, right? So we're seeing a lot of that out there where people are essentially using ChatGPT, for example, like a Google replacement, where you're ask the internet a question. But what if you could just ask your own marketing and sales data a question, and it gives you not just a couple of numbers, but real meaningful insight. So it has that analytical layer on top of it. So I can ask it a meaningful question in layman's terms about why are our customer opportunities slipping out of the pipeline? Why aren't we closing as many deals? What persona is the strongest for us? And it's going to give you data-backed answers in real human terms.
That was really helpful. Thank you for staying. I've been doing a lot of reading and thinking about it. And it's like, how do you use that? But that was really helpful to kind of break it down in simple terms.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a lot of it too, is the sort of backbone of systems integrations, right? Is we want to be able to meet people where we are, right? We're not so naive as to think that HubSpot is the only tool that any of these businesses are using, right? Even the mom and pop SMBs out there are using double digit apps to run their businesses. And so as more and more people are using ChatGPT, again, let's meet them where they are. They're already building that behavior of seeking guidance and information and answers from a tool like that. So let's plug HubSpot into that and meet them where they are.
Man, that's powerful. I cannot wait. I am so excited for everyone to really get exposure to this. And I think the what we can do with that data is going to be so powerful, and it's kind of hard to even wrap your brain around yet, but it's very exciting.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's also just, yeah, we are very much in this accelerated curve right now where it feels like every time I get used to something, there's some new development, there's some new model, some new tool. And so the possibilities that we're imagining today, like 2 weeks from now, could be even bigger. And so we're, we're excited to be in where we are now on the ground floor and like the first CRM that's really doing this. And I'm sure that won't be the case for long, but that's just the nature of the pace of innovation.
Right, absolutely. Wonderful. Well, thank you. So, kind of piggybacking off that, but taking a bit of a turn, we're going to talk about the tales from the trenches for a bit. So, we both know HubSpot does a really nice job pulling data for sales and marketing teams. We've kind of talked a little bit about that already. So, I'd love to hear from you a time that a HubSpot customer has struggled with their data, reports, dashboards, the like. What did they struggle with, and why was it such a hard journey for them?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question because I've had many similar conversations, and I'll use one relatively recent one as sort of the basis here. But you know, the promise is, yeah, you have all your data in one system, and by and large, that's the truth. Like HubSpot's really good at capturing your data, but knowing how to turn structured and or unstructured data into a report on a dashboard that can lead to like actual human action and next steps is a whole nother thing, right? And so there's so many times where I talk to folks, and there's a particular person in mind I'm thinking of where they come to me at the point of frustration with the idea that it's just not possible, right? And that's a really frustrating position to be in. We've all been there. And so you kind of start to unwind the problem and you realize their experience is really valid. And here's where it breaks down, right? So the data is in the system, but the person who is actually going in to try to build a report, they were not necessarily the ones who set up the system architecture,
Mhm.
deciding what data goes into what properties and what objects and like where it all lives and where it all should be so that it's retrievable. But when you're the person building the report and you're pulling the fields into the report and you're getting a bunch of zeros or no values, how could you not think or come to the conclusion that, well, this just is impossible, the data doesn't exist? So that conversation comes around a lot. And what you start to realize is that you know, the the data does exist, but how could that person know where to look for it if they weren't told? And so I think it's this really interesting confluence of like systems and people, right? So
Mm.
the data is in there. Someone set it up with a purpose and an intention, but then they didn't document it or they didn't tell you about it. And so again, when you're that poor person who's been asked to build a report on a deadline and you're banging your head against your keyboard saying, there's no data, I can't do this, this just isn't possible. It's a really frustrating situation. And so we sort of see like the silos aren't like just in the tools, like the silos are also in the departments and the organizations. That person, how could they have known? And so after I think like this deep connector thing really kind of cuts through that noise and says, hey, like if the data's in there and ChatGPT has access to the data, it doesn't have to bang its head against the keyboard. It can find it much faster and doesn't need the documentation. It will just find the data, bring you the insight, and hopefully cut through a lot of that frustration.
Yeah, that is also what I'm really excited about. I don't know if you see this, but I see it quite often where the people that are building the strategy versus the people who are maybe setting it up versus the people that pull a report versus the people that analyze and action the report are like different people or different parts of your brain. And so sometimes we're asking people, our digital marketers, like, hey, can you pull me a report? And that's one thing, and that can be really complicated in its own right. But then we're saying, now analyze this and then give me recommendations. And that's like a whole different ball of wax, it seems like, where we're asking people of like, now go through and do some deep analysis and if thens and hypotheses to these, and so I think that too is really exciting to think about, like, helping each of those roles and teammates kind of put that together. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I 100% agree. There's always like uh, a then what or so what moment when you get to each one of those steps, right? Like, okay, is the data there? Yes. Okay, so what? All right, well, let's build a report so we can understand it. Okay, we built the report. Looks nice. Okay. but what is it actually telling us, or what should we do next, right? So there's always a so what and then what sort of attitude, and again, that's honestly those are multiple points of failure if we're not all singing from the same hymn sheet or understanding like why we should ask these questions, or frankly, too, is like, are we even asking the right question? And I think that's a really big part of it too, is like hypothesis testing and myth busting and trying to make sure that like the insights may surprise us, right? A lot of the times we come to the table with assumptions about what the data is going to say, and like having effective tools in place to help you cut through that noise is really helpful. And I guess honestly, kind of cutting off some of those biases, right?
Yeah. I really love when you said, "Then what, so what?" I think that's like, we try to give some prompts to our team on that, kind of in that same vein, because the data because there is so much data in a system like HubSpot and really probably any other system, it can kind of be overwhelming, and you're kind of paralyzed by so much data that you can't sort through always the then what and the so what. And like you said, even asking the right questions. Like sometimes we find that clients or even teammates will ask so many questions, but not all of them can have a then what, so what. So distilling that down into what is the most important, is really helpful with this deep research connector too. I think is going to be really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely, right?
In a perfect world, right? It's the marriage of that left brain and the right brain part of it. It's like the creative strategy aspect, but that's also informed by hard data and analytics. And one is only as good as your ability to have the other, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and where it always had to be sort of humans, I think now putting those together, like using what the strategist comes up with and those executors are setting up, but then using some of like the AI learning in there is really going to help customers do more faster.
Yeah,
Yeah, cool.
absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, now tell me then, why isn't it easier? So, why does something as basic as finding high converting customer segments or forecasting or really any other thing like that in HubSpot or any other system, why does it require so many spreadsheets and analysts and people and prayers, right? Like, why does that happen? If we kind of talked about it, knowing that you have the data, then why isn't it easier?
Yeah. No, it's a really good question. I think there's a few pieces that go into that. One is like there's just so many different kinds of data. And there's so many inputs, right? I mean, we think about the current state of digital marketing, and there are so many like behavioral inputs to consider, right? Especially if we're thinking like in the B2B world, just as an example, someone that's assessing a long-term sales cycle is going to have so many different touch points, but they don't all mean the same thing. And then there's also the like on paper fit, right? Like, does this person fit our ICP? And so those are like two very different types of pieces of data. And so they're often structured or stored in very different ways and places inside of HubSpot. And so again, we can sit back and say, well, HubSpot's really good at collecting this data, but so what, right? Like, why can't I just get a really straightforward answer to what feels like a simple question? And again, I think a lot of that has to do with the interface, right? Like HubSpot's got a lot of pride in our consistent UI and our unified code base, but again, it's like if you're staring at the report builder, it can be pretty intimidating, right? Like the good news is we have so much data and therefore we have so many inputs. The bad news is we have so much data and so many inputs. It's a lot to wade through. So again, like having an ability to just cut through to the simple question and actually get a real answer to that is the real win here. And I think historically that's just been really hard to do, which is why, as you said, you find yourself tapping the shoulder of that one coworker who's an Excel wizard, being like, "Can you turn this into a pivot table for me and tell me what this really means?" It's 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 the historical way that we've often got there, right? Like there's more than one way to do it, but it's cumbersome and it's tedious. And so hopefully this represents like a really good way to skip a few steps and get straight to the good part.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think simple is smart, but I also think it's probably the most difficult. Like it's really hard to cut stuff out and get to like one simple thing versus adding to it, whether it be research, reporting, or really anything else for that matter.
Yeah, absolutely. But we're seeing a ton of that too. Like you make a really good point is that like historically, the structured data has really been the only thing we could effectively use to get good analysis, right? Like the data that's stored in a structured way in properties and objects in HubSpot. But there's all this unstructured data now, like recordings and call notes and all these things that are stored in these different places. And I think just one thing that we're starting to see, especially with tools like ChatGPT, is like their ability to read and parse and take meaning from unstructured data is a huge quantum leap forward. So we're now also getting to that world where it's like we don't have to miss that nuance. And when we're just dealing with spreadsheets, it's almost an impossible task to actually get any value out of that without putting a ton of time into it. And so now we're trying to give people their time back, right? It's that fast part that's a huge part of the process here.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, awesome. Thank you. That's really helpful. Anything else on the HubSpot Deep Research Connector? Like any lowdown details that we want to make sure people are at least checking out and knowing about?
Yeah, I would just say, like, I think, rightly so, a lot of people are pausing to ask important questions about, like, is how secure is my data? Is this the right thing to do? And I think that's always something that should be reported. What I'll give the HubSpot team a lot of credit for is we're trying to be as transparent as possible and publish a lot of information about all the like answers to those questions, right? And so I think that's a really important piece of like product development that our team has always tried to adhere to is like we want to move fast, but we also want to move forward in a smart fashion. So I would honestly start by like if you have those questions, there's a good chance we've anticipated those questions and tried to come up with answers to them. And the other thing I would just say too is like we've really intentionally tried to make it a very low barrier to entry. Like there are some licensing requirements on the chat GPT side, like you do have to have some paid license of that, but it can connect with essentially any version of HubSpot. So we're seeing even again those mom and pop SMBs who maybe already had a licensed ChatGPT. You say, well, with HubSpot Starter, I can at least start asking those questions and use this integration to my advantage. The the principle of like I want to just be able to ask this in simple language should apply to any type of business, and I'm really happy that as we've gone to market with this, we're trying to give it to as many possible customers as possible. There's a lot of value out there.
Who do you think's going to use it most? Like where do you see it being the most beneficial?
Yeah, I mean, I think in these early days, it's certainly going to be the folks that are already accustomed to using tools like ChatGPT, right? Like we're trying to meet people where they are. So maybe in some sense, the sort of tech literate folks who are always trying to do tools and are already pretty embedded in a tool like ChatGPT, like it'll be so easy to translate because again, they're already starting to get good at asking it good questions and just have the instinct of, oh, let me check with this tool first. But honestly, I think like the dream is that it's powerful enough that whether you're, a Fortune 500 company or a mom and pop in the garage, like it should be able to help you. So I think honestly, it'll be the folks that are already adept at using ChatGPT, but obviously that also is a fast curve. Like people are picking that up daily and moving super fast. But also, it's just the people who have been disciplined about having data in their HubSpot. So longtime HubSpot customers that have a ton of data that's probably been untapped or under investigated, they're about to reap the rewards.
Do you think it's going to be more beneficial for marketers or sales teams or service teams? Do you have or really everyone?
I mean, maybe a cop out answer, but I think the answer should be everyone, right? It will come back to maybe to some extent, like what type of data you actually have in HubSpot. So if you historically have used HubSpot as your marketing automation platform, it's probably going to be a little bit more beneficial as a partner, as a marketer. If you don't have a lot of sales data in there, you're not going to get a lot of sales insights. But I think the idea is that if you have the data, it'll be helpful in some regard, sort of regardless of which hubs you have or how much HubSpot you actually have.
Absolutely. All right, where should people go to find this? Where do we look? Where do we send them?
Yeah. So HubSpot.com/AI tools/open AI connector. It's a little bit of a mouthful, but honestly, if you type it into ChatGPT or Google, you'll find it. We've got a lot of public facing resources on this. Demo videos, more information on those FAQs that I mentioned, like how we built this, why we built this, all that good stuff. It's very easy to get started today.
Awesome. Thank you. Finally, we've got hot seat. A morning person or night owl?
I'm a night owl. I wish I could change that, but I'm a night owl.
Really? Okay. What does that entail? Are you like gaming or
Well, I'm too afraid to look at my phone time statistics, but I will say when I'm my best self, I am reading a good book late at
Okay.
night. That's usually how I get myself to fall asleep.
Sure. Yeah. When are our best selves, isn't that the truth? Rolling out new HubSpot features or optimizing existing ones?
Optimizing.
Oh,
There's
really?
yeah, there's so much shiny new toy syndrome out there, which is so understandable. Like I fall victim to it all the time, but I also think that the team is so good at innovating things so fast that people miss these. And so like going back and making sure you're nailing the fundamentals, like that's a huge unlock for me.
Totally agree. I think that's whether HubSpot or not. I've been thinking about that for our own businesses. Everyone's looking to innovate and evolve and just making sure you've got the core and the base really nailed before you keep taking on. So that's cool to hear. Two more: Netflix binge or reading a book.
Reading a book, which isn't to say that I haven't been guilty of a good Netflix binge, but my physical media holding on to reading real books is something I hold very dear.
Okay. Is there anyone you recommend? Is there like a favorite book we should know about?
You know, I just finished reading this really great book called Care and Feeding by Laura Bolivar. She was the longtime personal assistant to Anthony Bourdain. So if you think about food, love food at all, or just like memoirs in general, it's a really, really cool story.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Last one. Would you rather attend inbound or get the chance to speak at inbound?
Feels almost like a trick question because I've been so lucky to attend inbound several times. Um, but I think I'd still stick with the tent. Like there are so many awesome speakers there, and like as much as I'm a HubSpot employee, like I'm also there to learn just like everyone else. So yeah, I would love to be an attendee again.
Yeah, man, it's awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And for all the listeners out there, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you always know when a new episode lands. Until then, don't forget, the best things to happen to your team will always happen between the silos.